elements of public enterprise, and I mentioned that that has now entirely changed. We are opening up. The license Raj has gone. So when I was a joint secretary in government, in the Commerce Ministry, there used to be a queue of business people and their representatives wanting to meet joint secretaries and secretaries. Today the Commerce Ministry is redundant, is bereft of representatives wanting to meet because there are no licenses to give and take. But there is a paradox. I mean, there may not be licenses to give, but there is a reasonable degree of dishonesty when it comes to actual implementation, and that is something which India is fighting for. We are not able to fight corruption the way it should have been fought. There are institutions, there is the judiciary, there is this great demand for the Lokpal, as you now know, the Anna Hazare movement, which you have seen so clearly, for establishing an ombudsman to keep a check on dishonesty. But how and when and if, those are very big question marks. Will the ombudsman be the solution or the panacea? Can we cure dishonesty through that? Because if you have dishonesty from the lowest to very high levels, then how do we counter that? And will it be through moral policing? Will it be through legal means? We really have no answers to it. So it's again, like I say, I've often said in India that this is a democracy in progress. It's not yet a ripe, mature democracy, although we have elections now even at the panchayat level. So a group of villages, I don't know how familiar you are with our panchayat system, but a group of villages get together to form a panchayat. Panchayat means પાંચ, it comes from five. So 5 villages get together and they elect. And the interesting thing there is that there are reservations. So even women have reservations for the panchayat system. There is, depending on the state, there's roughly about 30 to 40 to 50% reservations for women's panchayats. There is, of course, 22% reservations for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So all that is happening. But what is also true is that all these measures have not made a dramatic dent in reducing dishonesty from the system. And that's a major cause of concern. And that brings me to the reason why I really came here on Indo-Pak relations. I think most Indians want good relations with Pakistan. It's now a no-brainer to say this amongst people. It's, I would say, not even 2% or 3% people in India would say that let's not have good relations with Pakistan. The Speaker's delegation that is here with you today, one of the people here is Tarun Vijay, who's actually in the parliament as a nominee from the RSS. Now that's a Hindu right-wing group. But having said that, even somebody like Tarun Vijay would not go back and say that, look, let's not be friends with Pakistan. I'm not saying that there is great love for Muslims in his heart, but that's the reality of the situation. One thing that I see is, of course, that the businessman should somehow take over. This 2.7 billion trade that we have, can it go to 10 billion? Can it go to 15 billion? Because the businessmen have these unique ways of sorting out things between countries because money speaks for itself. And many years ago, I will relate a story because I was sitting with Dhirubhai Ambani, who was then a leading industrialist. He had a stroke. I'm going back to 1999. And this is a real story because he was involved with the Vajpayee government as part of Track-II. Because he felt that if business makes an inroad into Pakistan and vice versa, then things would automatically start improving. And he had called Dilip Kumar to meet with him because he believed that Dilip Kumar was friends with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif in those days. And he was persuading Dilip Kumar to go to New York because the General Assembly was to be on and Nawaz Sharif Saab was going there. And Dhirubhai said that, look, I'll give you my plane, go to New York. And Dilip Kumar said, bhai, main to ab bahut budha ho gaya hu, main New York wagera to jana nahi, lekin main London mein mil lunga. So Nawaz on his way back would stop at the Dorchester and he would stop at Dorchester. Now, Dhirubhai believed that should there be an opening of business relations with Pakistan, then automatically things would start flowing. And unfortunately, soon after that, Kargil happened, and everything went back. Everything went on a back burner. But speaking as an academic, we thought in the university that how do we contribute? Can we contribute as academics? Let the politicians think of big things. Those are not in our hands. And we think that Jamia Millia Islamia, for instance, and universities in Pakistan can get together to create an exchange program that can serve as a model for other universities to follow. Instead of, ambitious programs that might be hard to implement, we can take meaningful steps to overcome institutional inertia. And I believe that this is possible. Because 2.5 years ago, when we were starting this program in a big way in Jamia Millia, I went and met Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, who is the National Security Advisor, and he has been the Indian High Commissioner too. And he was completely enthused with the idea. He said, of course students must come, and of course teachers must go. If we can have 5 students or 7 students from the Quaid-e-Azam University or LUMS coming to Jamia for a semester, and they carry their credits, and if I can send 5 students or 10 students to LUMS or to the Quaid-e-Azam University or any other place, and if a professor from here comes for a term to us, and someone like Ajay, who's been working on Pakistan, who understands Pakistan, can come here for a term, they go back as ambassadors of Pakistan back to India. Students who would come from here would lose this phobia of India if there exists. क्या होगा हमारा जाके शाम को कोई हमें रोकेगा तो नहीं? क्या हम फिल्म देख सकते हैं? I spoke to a lot of people, a lot of my students. Of course it is true that some students would tend to think, that if we come back from Pakistan after 6 months, will the intelligence bureau ask us, क्या करके आए हो 6 महीने, वहाँ क्या हो रहा है, क्या नहीं हो रहा है? And likewise, I have spoken to people from Pakistan coming and saying, नहीं भाई एक टर्म तो हम नहीं आके रहेंगे, क्योंकि बाद में जाएंगे तो हमको ISI पूछेगा क्या हुआ है, क्या करके आए हो, क्यों आए? I really believe that neither the ISI nor the intelligence bureau are interested in these guys. There is enough interchange of exchange through other means for them to, labor and run after students or teachers. But we will be able to establish genuine intellectual rapport amongst ourselves. Let us hold seminars, जो आपने ये distinguished speakers series की है, आपके लोग हमारे यहाँ आए, हमारे यहाँ लोग आपके यहाँ जाएं. It will make such a huge difference to clear up cobwebs amongst ordinary citizens. Of course, I have a lot of relations in Pakistan. Half my family came in Pakistan. It was a huge coincidence that today coming for breakfast down here, I met Shahid Hassan, who used to be in the Benazir government, and he happens to be my nephew. And I spent the entire forenoon with him. And the only conversation we were having is that how does Shahid come to India to see my mother, who's 90 years old because of this silly visa regime? And I'm not able to put my finger on it. But I think if all of us try to work at this assiduously and remove the cobwebs from the mind of politicians, let the students come, let teachers come, let us hold seminars, let us hold conferences. We certainly know that for students and conferences, the government of India doesn't put such an embargo. Because we call a lot of people. And as we were sitting in the plane, in fact, Ajay got a call from the Joint Secretary in the Home Ministry that 2 people who were coming from Pakistan have been cleared. So somebody from the Home Office actually calls us and says, कि साहब उनका visa तो clear हो जाए, उनको आने दीजिए. But when it comes to the common man, something is going wrong. Will we let the politicians stop for us? Or will we, as knowledgeable people, step up the pressure on our politicians that for heaven's sake let people come? So we did, believe me, raise a lot of pressure on the government of India that so far as the Jamia Millia Islamia is concerned, please, for heaven's sake, don't put an embargo. And let me tell you that we've had a very easy way. Whenever we've held a conference, people have been allowed to come. And again, I was telling, I think Shahid today, that I was having difficulty in my own Momani, who has an American passport, but of course went from here to come from America to India, despite my trying very hard. But I have not had problems in teachers coming from here for a seminar and so. And my understanding with the Home Ministry in India is, and with the Foreign Office, is that they are happy to let people come for a semester or two. Work permits are not an issue. Let's try it. If you can get people ready, I think we will. I think I've spoken a lot. I just want to, when I was coming, I just said, I heard an ashar from Ali Sardar Jafri many years ago, which touched my heart, because it deals so much on Indo-Pak, and he said that, "Ghulam tum bhi the kal tak, ghulam hum bhi the. Naha ke khoon mein aati thi fasle azadi. मजा तो जब था कि मिलकर इलाज जां करते, खुद अपने हाथ से तामीर गुल सिता करते, हमारे दर्द में तुम्हारे दर्द में हम शरीक होते और फिर जश्न आशना करते, तुम आओ गुलशने लाहौर से चमन बरदोश, हम आए सुबह बनारस की रोशनी लेकर, हिमालय की हवाओं की ताजगी लेकर, और उसके बाद से पूछें कि कौन दुश्मन है." Well, thank you very much for letting me come here and speak with you. It's been really an honor for me.
Thank you, sir. Before I say something about the lecture and open the floor to questions and discussion, as I said earlier, it's also my pleasure to have Ajay Darshan Behra here. Dr. Behra, as Professor Jung also mentioned, has done a lot of work on Pakistan, and I would want him to say a few words in terms also of what Professor Jung has suggested, and if he has any suggestions in relation to improving India-Pakistan relations, they would be most welcome. So over to Dr. Behra.
Thanks, Ajaj. I feel a little bit like an intruder because I was not supposed to be sharing this dais, but it's kind and gracious of you to have asked me to come and join you. And I'm also not prepared, but I'm here essentially because it was a good opportunity for me to come and catch up with friends and visit the Jinnah Institute and all. Well, I think there was a certain amount of substantive suggestions which I think Mr. Jung hasn't fleshed out, because it would require basically sitting down and talking about a lot of these specific programs that one can do. And I don't know, I mean, if you look at the initiatives that we've had, particularly with the Jinnah Institute, it's happening at a different level, but we are also looking at the universities, because that's where dominantly the impressionable minds are, the younger generation. And also in terms of the institutions where the whole question of ideas and thoughts can emerge. In specific terms, I mean, we've discussed this a couple of times, and in fact, we have put in a certain amount of effort in the last 2-3 years. But I think there is still that inertia, because of which, despite ideas and suggestions, it has not been so easy to operationalize them. When we talk about these programs, whether they're conferences or joint projects or fellowships, etc., visiting professorships, you would see maybe they still happen at a very ad hoc level. It's not that conferences aren't happening. I mean, conferences do take place. People are visiting each other's countries. You have a large number of conferences happening, to kind of institutionalize them in a way in which there is a greater degree of integration between the academies in both the countries. It could be taken to a larger level, one, because of our limited perspective in terms of essentially handling social sciences. We are looking at essentially an exchange in the disciplines of political science, history, economics, etc. But there is a whole range that can be done in the sciences and also the professional courses, whether they are in management or mass communications. And all, every university has its own strengths, and our university has strengths in certain areas which can be tapped into. The question as to why would someone want to go to Jamia? Because Jamia has strengths in certain areas, and it would be meaningful to be associated either with that program in terms of a degree or even a visiting fellowship. But even within the social sciences, because I'm not going to be speaking about the sciences because that's a completely different domain, but even within the social sciences, if you look ahead, let's say for 10 years or something, and there is a process in which institutions, centers, programs from both the countries can get integrated. We have several MOUs between certain universities in both India and Pakistan, but I don't think so there's a single MOU which is actually functioning significantly or at an optimal level. Some of them have managed to keep up in terms of the programs and exchanges, maybe one or two colleges and things like that. But some of the major universities, for instance, Jamia has MOUs with 2 or 3 universities in Pakistan. But we haven't seen that kind of interest, because I have personally taken a lot of interest, but I haven't seen that kind of, because eventually what I find is, unless and until there's someone to push through that idea and take up responsibility for executing it, it won't happen, because there's a lot of work. There's a lot of difficulties. It's not easy, because you land up using up a lot of time in simply looking after the logistics and not so much the academic side. So people may not have that kind of time to push through this thing. But if we really want to do something in those terms, that can we have a systematic agenda, goal for the next 5 years, 10 years, in which there is a process of integration. It can be at an institutional level between institutions like Jinnah Institute with other institutions in Delhi or any other place in India, or even Jinnah Institute with, we have our own research institutes in our university system. We could, host programs for you, we could host your scholars, researchers. Similarly, our researchers can come. Jinnah Institute can offer us a fellowship for 6 months or 2 months or 3 months. Someone can come from there, whether it's a student or a faculty member, spend time here, go back. Similarly, we could have a similar arrangement where we could host someone from the Jinnah Institute. So we are looking at all kinds of possibilities, whether it's with institutions like the Jinnah Institute, we are on the same wavelength, but it could also be with the other departments in the university, etc., where we can specifically chalk out some of these programs. I don't want to go beyond that, because it actually requires a certain amount of clear thinking and creating that kind of a program where we can actually sit down and discuss and what is feasible and what is not feasible, because by the end of it we also have to look at the limitations within which we'll be working, because generally when we talk as if things can be just executed because we want it to happen. It will probably not happen in those senses. But then if you have a clear idea and specifics, let us pick up 1 or 2 programs like this and try and see that in the next 2-3 years, if we even can have a semblance of it happening, and if both sides, as the Vice Chancellor pointed out, that when he interacts with the government circles, what he finds is essentially that there's no great diffidence or there is no inhibition that this should not happen. There is, in fact, most of them will come in. But then the point is that nothing much happens beyond that. And therefore what we feel is if we at our level as academics can initiate some of these processes, I think it will have an impact on the government itself. And I don't see any reason why it should have any kind of a negative influence or any kind of outcome with which the governments will necessarily be worried about. And therefore, I mean, even before we've in fact instituted it properly, I mean, I only see it in very positive terms. For any government to feel that this is something which doesn't have value and in fact in the long term is essentially going to integrate us in such a way that